Ryan Garcia's return to the spotlight didn't just fizzle, it took a sharp turn into uncharted territory. In what many expected to be a triumphant rebound, or at least a competitive outing, Garcia stepped into the ring at Times Square and walked away with a unanimous decision loss to Rolando Romero. That's right, Romero, a fighter who most considered the clear underdog, not only held his own, but managed to drop Garcia in the second round and control the tempo for most of the night. It wasn't just a defeat on the scorecards, it was a psychological gut punch that's forced Garcia and everyone around him to reassess what's next. The judges weren't split on this one either. They scored it decisively, 115-112 twice, and a staggering 118-109 in Romero's favor. For a fighter trying to rewrite his story, Garcia might have just scribbled a whole new chapter he never intended. 2. This defeat carries weight far beyond the ring. It marks Garcia's second professional loss, but more importantly, it stalls the momentum he had worked so hard to rebuild after the chaos of the Devin Haney saga. Let's not forget, Garcia's last win against Haney was overshadowed and ultimately voided after he tested positive for ostarine, a banned substance. That controversy led to a 1-year suspension and immediately threw his credibility into question. Since then, he's been making an effort to clean up his image, enrolling in voluntary drug testing programs, doing interviews about redemption, and talking like a man on a mission. But after Friday night's performance, fans and critics alike are wondering if Garcia's story of redemption is still believable. If anything, his body language in the ring spoke volume. He didn't look like the explosive, confident fighter fans remembered. He looked exhausted, off rhythm, and more reactive than proactive. After the fight, Garcia addressed the media with a mix of vulnerability and uncertainty. He didn't dodge questions or shift blame, but his answers painted a picture of a fighter lost in transition. "Whatever the fans want," he said when asked about his next move. "If they want me to run it back with Raleigh, let's do it. If they want me to go straight back to Devin, let's do it." It was the kind of response that shows heart, sure, but also the kind that lacks conviction. This isn't a video game, where fans pick your opponent. It's a career. And many would argue that leaving such a critical decision up to public opinion is more about damage control than strategy. The boxing world is tough, and right now Garcia doesn't just need direction. He needs leadership, clarity, and above all, confidence in his own judgment. More than the loss itself, what really stood out was Garcia's honesty about his struggles during training camp. In his own words, he said he couldn't get anything going. Not physically, not mentally, not even technically. "I didn't feel like I had more conditioning or more energy," he admitted. "I didn't feel like I was progressing in any way." That's a brutal reality for any fighter, let alone one with the eyes of the world on him. He went on to explain that he brought these concerns to his trainer, Derek James, as early as possible. But with only 5 weeks to prepare, it became clear that the puzzle pieces just weren't fitting together in time. For someone known for their explosiveness and flair, Garcia looked flat. And when a fighter looks that off on fight night, it's rarely just a matter of rust. Something deeper was off, whether it was burnout, self-doubt, or the weight of controversy finally catching up to him. The aftermath of the Romero fight isn't just about damage control, it's about legacy repair. Romero now holds the WBA's secondary welterweight title, and Garcia has to watch from the sidelines as another fighter builds momentum off his name. That hurts, both professionally and personally. The idea of an immediate rematch with Romero is appealing from a redemption standpoint, but the optics are tricky. Garcia didn't just lose narrowly, he was outworked and outclassed in key moments. If he goes into a rematch too quickly without real adjustments, the result could be even worse. On the flip side, chasing a Haney rematch without correcting course would feel hollow. After all, their first meeting ended in controversy, and the narrative around Garcia now includes more questions than answers. Either way, the path ahead is steep, and there's no shortcut back to the top. But what's most concerning for fans, and maybe for Garcia himself, is the perception that his explosiveness is gone. Social media hasn't been kind in the wake of the Romero loss, with fans speculating that his diminished power could be linked to the absence of PEDs following his suspension. It's a harsh accusation, but one that's gaining traction online. During the Haney fight, Garcia's punches looked like missiles. Against Romero, they barely landed with impact. That discrepancy has people talking, and the chatter isn't flattering. Whether it's true or not, public perception in boxing can be as dangerous as any right hook, and Garcia is now battling a narrative that could stick with him far longer than any post-fight bruise. What's next for Ryan Garcia isn't just a matter of matchmaking, it's a matter of identity. Is he the same fighter who lit up arenas and made headlines with knockouts, or has the chaos of the last year between suspensions, personal battles, and a visible decline in form stripped him of the very edge that made him special? These aren't easy questions to answer, and the worst thing Garcia could do right now is rush back into another high-stakes fight without clarity. Whether it's Romero, Haney, or someone else, Garcia needs time, not just to train, but to reset, mentally, physically, and emotionally. The fighter we saw against Romero wasn't just beatable, he looked unsure of himself. And in boxing, uncertainty is blood in the water. There's also the question of Derek James, and whether this camp structure is right for Garcia long-term. 5 weeks of training isn't much, especially for a fighter trying to rebuild. And if Garcia felt things weren't clicking, that's something the team needs to examine more closely. Is it a communication issue, a clash of styles, or something else entirely? Whatever it is, the current setup isn't producing results. And if Garcia truly wants to climb back to the top, it might be time for hard conversations and even harder decisions. Because in this sport, loyalty is noble, but results are everything. Still, Garcia's story is far from over. At just 26, he's got time on his side, but time only helps if it's used wisely. The challenge now isn't just about picking the right opponent, it's about picking the right path. Does he focus on redemption against Romero and show he can right a wrong? Or does he double down on the Haney rivalry and try to rewrite that chapter without controversy? Either choice could work, but only if Garcia does the internal work first. The version of Ryan Garcia we saw last Friday night wasn't prepared for war. The next version needs to be battle-tested and bulletproof. For now, all eyes will be on Garcia's next move. The silence between fights often says more than the noise after them. Will he take a step back and recalibrate? Will he announce a rematch that feels more like a statement? Or will he surprise everyone with a new direction that signals growth and maturity? Whatever the answer, one thing's clear. This moment is a turning point, and how Garcia handles it will either redeem his promise or rewrite his narrative altogether. Boxing has always loved a comeback story. Now, it's up to Ryan to decide if he's still the author of his own. In the days following the loss, Garcia has remained active on social media, but not in the way some might expect. Instead of deflecting blame or issuing cryptic tweets, he's been oddly quiet, at least for someone known for his online presence. It's a silence that feels heavy, almost deliberate. For a fighter who usually commands headlines, the lack of noise suggests introspection. Fans are reading between the lines, wondering if Garcia is finally hitting the pause button to take a long, hard look at everything, from his preparation and team to his mental space and future ambitions. And honestly, that might be the smartest move he can make right now. Sometimes growth isn't loud. Sometimes it happens in the quiet moments when no one's watching. At the same time, it's impossible to ignore just how much this loss has shifted the narrative around Garcia. Once viewed as the poster boy of boxing's next generation, he now finds himself fighting to stay in that conversation. That's not to say he's washed up or done, far from it. But boxing is a brutal sport, not just physically, but in how quickly it moves on. New stars are always emerging. New hype trains are always leaving the station. And if Garcia wants to stay relevant, he needs more than just his name. He needs results. He needs a win that silences doubters, reshapes the story, and reminds the world why he became a star in the first place. And that's what makes his next opponent such a pivotal choice. Romero may not be the biggest name in the division, but after that performance, he owns bragging rights over Garcia, and fans love a revenge arc. On the other hand, Haney still represents unfinished business, and Garcia may feel he has something to prove beyond the cloud of that failed drug test. But there's also a third option, one that hasn't been talked about enough. He could take a step back from top-tier competition and focus on a confidence-building fight, something less about spectacle and more about fundamentals. Because before Garcia can conquer the division again, he needs to prove to everyone, but especially to himself, that he can still dominate the basics.